we need obviously to have leadership to move this agenda forward. And we've got some comments coming in about what it means to build that, and questions about what it means to and how you can build more effective leadership at the local level. Because the reality is that ministers of education cannot on their own transform entire education systems overnight unilaterally. There are many centers of interest and power through the education system, including local boards. And one of the questions, a couple of questions related to this have come across, and maybe Bendina, you can give us some initial comments on this from your experience as a superintendent. How do you deal with a board who may believe they're committed to inclusive education in general terms, but don't have a really clearly articulated vision that would drive forward the kind of reform that you've witnessed and been a part of in the school districts that you've been that you've participated in? How do you build that leadership with a local board? Because that is also one of the centers of power that needs to be addressed and mobilized to create an inclusive education system.
That's an excellent question, and I think I've often said as superintendent of schools, one of the most important jobs that I had was to be in schools, to know what is happening in the classrooms as much as I could, even though I certainly wasn't able to do what I wanted to do in that area, but also to encourage our trustees to share in that experience. So in other words, we as senior staff and administrators, staff in the school district, have an obligation to also provide that education for our trustees, so that at every board meeting there's a presentation on some aspect of education, including inclusion, that in sessions with our staff that trustees are also encouraged and invited to attend, so that they become part of gaining knowledge about what inclusion really means, what are the benefits of inclusion, and what are the real costs of inclusion, so that when the board is making their budget decisions, they can also be very cautious in making the decisions that are really focused on building the kind of education that they want for all children in their school district. So I think it is absolutely a responsibility to engage the trustees in that kind of conversation prior to decisions being made. I think the other aspect is that our publics can have a huge impact on influencing trustees or who is elected. And I have seen some incredibly influential parents in communities who have been able to either run as trustees and be elected, or have been able to engage trustees or candidates in conversations about what they want for their children. So parents who have seen success with inclusion can be incredible advocates and gain huge success in terms of influencing the decisions that trustees make.
Bendina, we've got a question coming in from Ontario, where you've got a context where some boards are opening and budgeting for special classes, even separate schools, and in fact there is public support for that. Again, I think it's related to we've got limited resources. We want to make sure we're investing in the so-called brightest and best, and there seems to be a rationale from special ed, from a particular perspective on special ed, and resources for opening separate boards. And you may, in fact, by taking that to the public, polarize the views even more. How do you work with a board? How do you turn a board around when you've got some pretty strong leaders on a board that just don't seem to get inclusion? And what advice would you give to parents and advocates in other jurisdictions that are facing that today?
I think part of what we can be doing is sharing success, in a variety of ways. In other words, writing newspaper articles, and I know we're swamped already, but newspaper articles that talk about success for our children, that parents can be engaged in conversations with other parents, in other words, parents who are pleased with how their children are doing, can certainly have more influence on other parents than educators have, because we start to sound like we're being defensive and really defending the status quo. I think the other aspect is that it's key that provincial governments have policy and practice in place that in fact says that segregated schools, exclusion, is not going to be accepted in this province. Now, I understand that's going to be very difficult, but I think that provincial government politicians really have an obligation to uphold the tenets of Article 24 of the UN Convention, which is what every province and territory has agreed to.
So there's I guess this is how you balance the roles and responsibilities of different players in the system. So it is the role of the provincial government to set that high bar while respecting the autonomy of the board to figure out how to realize that in their own district. How do you, from a superintendent's perspective and experience, how do you maintain that autonomy for a board and respect that autonomy, while respecting also that an overarching policy framework can set some pretty clear direction?
If there are bookends set by provincial legislation, then the boards and the staff within those boards have an obligation to say, okay, what is it that we can do in order to be successful within these bookends? I mean, we know that there's legislation out there that says thou shalt not use corporal punishment. I mean, that's a bad example, but no board is going to say corporal punishment is acceptable, even though provincial government has said it's not. So if provincial governments say all children have a right to be included in their community schools, and that is what is going to happen in every school district in this province, and that's legislation, then I'm optimistic that boards and their staff will figure it out, because we have amazing educators who are passionate about their work, and if they are given that opportunity to work together in a collaborative way where they can take prudent risks, learn together in a way that's no blame. If you're struggling, it's like asking the tough questions, learning from each other, visiting another classroom where things are working well, and being open to addressing our own practice as teachers, our own practice as districts. I have real faith that it's a human rights issue, and that we have smart educators who are going to figure it out and are figuring it out.